Yeah.
That's good, man. You look good. You look vibrant. You look happy and stuff. That's good to see.
It's been good. It's been good. Fall here it's my favorite time of the year. So
and you'd mentioned your training, so you're getting ready. Are you still doing track stuff, or what are you doing? What are you training for?
Yeah, all the tracks, like the big picture plan, but
yeah,
right now most of the tracks I know of are closed. So, and the US national team is like kind of on hold until probably early next year at least.
Mm-hmm.
So I'm trying to figure out what it all looks like, but big picture plan is I'm still kind of shooting for the Paris Olympics for the team pursuit.
Okay.
And I hired a coach like maybe 6 months ago, and
cool.
working specifically towards that, and all the road stuff and all the gravel stuff it's all working towards that. So
Paris is 2024.
Yeah.
Okay. So 2021, that's not happening.
It's already decided. The US team didn't qualify, so yeah,
so you didn't miss out on anything.
Exactly.
Damn, dude. Okay. So that's interesting. So I had a good first question. So the whole point of these, man, I'm reaching, for Evoke bike stuff, I've been in like different forums and just help answering people's questions and a lot of basic stuff. And, a lot of the things that Patrick and we started this when we were talking on the phone. I'm like, dude, we should record this. Like, this is important information that people that are new, like, I would have loved to have known some stuff. Yeah. So I've just been reaching out to people that are in interesting situations, are experienced cyclists, have different backgrounds. Like I just did one with Purvis, who was running professionally in Sweden. I'm doing one like Andy Chastain, who's on like the industry side and things like that. Yeah. You obviously came to mind for actually a bunch of reasons. Number one, the track. You're really one of the only people that I know personally that's doing road, track, gravel. You've been successful in a lot of different areas of cycling, from collegiate to professional, but also just your leadership style. And it was really awesome. I think we were talking about this when I was in Boulder that weekend. Like, we all were on DNA, but it was like our first race together. We really didn't know each other. Yeah. And I was wondering, I wonder who's going to be like, all right, this is what we're doing. And I kind of thought it'd be you or Tanner. I didn't know Preston and I didn't know Pablo. And it was like pretty natural. You were just like, yo, guys, like, let's chat about this. And this is my thing. And you really led in a really awesome way that I think no matter where you go in life, it's like you're clearly a leader. You're talking about Olympics in 2024. And everyone that I talk to and myself, when we're like, oh, man, COVID really screwed things up. But it's for like this season or next season. Like, what is it like when you're planning for something so far out in a discipline that you're, would you say you're very new to? Like, you've ridden with these guys just since last year.
Right.
How does that all, how do you even attack that with your coach? Are you like, this is this year's goals, this is 2022, this is 2023? Or like, how far out are you shooting? And what is that like personally? Because I know you're not a planner, so I don't know.
I'm not a planner. Yeah, so we're kind of like, when I hired him, I was just like, the only race that I can think of that I really like actually deeply care about anymore is like the Olympic Games. And I read a book that actually my former teammate Ian Dilley wrote about a track sprinter that he basically he trained so hard through the full like quad leading into the Olympics that he like essentially sabotaged himself, because he was like deep in training blocks, going to races, just getting smoked. And then he just always had this big picture mindset of like, come the Olympics, like, I'm not going to get smoked. Like, it's all going to come together. I'm going to actually like, I don't know, basically like focus and peak for that race. And 4-year builds into that, where he would go to races and just get beat by guys that he knows that he's better than. And then it was all just for the sake of that training load and working towards the big picture. So it has been a little tricky with motivation stuff. Like, a lot of guys without racing like lose all motivation to train. And I think that's one thing that's far enough away that it's the COVID thing like hasn't really, at least in my mind, hasn't really disrupted that. Like, yes, USA Cycling is kind of floundering. The national team doesn't really have funding right now because USA Cycling has no money. Our coach got like furloughed, I guess. And so there's a track director still working with the women. And so I've been keeping in touch with him a little bit. And it's all just, I don't know, it's moving. It's another like point from that book was like control what you can control.
Yeah.
And so all the COVID stuff, all the budget cuts, all that's out of my control. I can't do anything about that. But what I can do is like behind the scenes, just train my ass off, and we'll see what happens. I'm only going to be better for it, whether or not the program comes back or whether or not the Olympics is even in the picture. Like, man, I'm just going to be better.
I agree with you 100%. Like I kind of thought about this year when I was, I went to a race and then I went to go back to a race and was like, I think I'm making the wrong decision, decided to shelf racing for this year. But I kept training and like hitting personal PRs and getting better and finding ways to get better at intervals and finding like just, when you train in blocks, it's like when you've done it long enough, you're like, ooh, that was interesting. Like, I'm going to try this time. And oh my God, that worked. And like, there's all these roads you go down, and I always think of you when you're like, we were talking about even resting, you're like, just go by sensations from Bobby Julich. And like, even on the other side, like sensations of like, nah, I think I'm going to add another day. And then maybe I'm going to go down this path and see what happens. And there's just like, I was better than like, I'm going to ride endurance for the next 6 months. Like,
exactly. And left to my own devices, I know that that's what I would do. And that's one of the reasons why, like, I love going out and exploring and just riding as much as I can all the time. And that's one of the big things that's kind of flipped for me this year is like last year when I ended up like winning a team pursuit national title because I got paired with Ashton Lambie and Colby Lang and like all these national team guys, which was so that was awesome. But at the same time, like I was way in over my head, and I kind of knew that I was pretty unprepared, and I was just going based on like road fitness, which it gets you so far, and it got me there. And it, like, I set track records at LA and Colorado Springs. And so now it's like, if I actually focus on track specific work, like how good could I be? And I don't know. And so that's what's exciting about this whole new endeavor. And at the same time, the freedom that COVID's really opened up to like, try new training techniques. And like, I'm doing way more VO2 work than I normally would, which I think is the opposite of what I've really done my entire career. So we'll see where it takes me.
I'm going to be just like mimicking you. Like the same thing. I went through like, I remember reading books and I'm like, there's no way my body could handle that. And that's one thing. Maybe it's just that once I moved to Tennessee, and in 2016, I was always like an FTP guy and had all like VO2 max stuff. You get it in races and it's already, your body's already where it's at, which we now know is really true. And I think after this is probably like my 4th year of really going after it. And maybe I've just matured more in that intensity. But I did some blocks where I was like, I can't believe I'm still like railing these things. And then you go back and do FTP work and that seems so easy. And I'm like, why was I doing this 10 years ago?
Exactly. Yeah, exactly.
So that was going to be actually one of my big questions when you're going from road to track. What do you, for someone that's watching, that's thinking of maybe dabbling, because track's one of those things that like, if you live close to your track, you can go and you can rent a bike and you can get into it. In upstate New York, there was one in Pennsylvania somewhere. I think it was a 5-hour drive.
Trexler Town,
Yes, exactly. Thank you. T-Town, they all said. And if you're going road to track, what is kind of like, what do you wish you knew going into that? And then once you get in there and you're like, hey, I'm committed to this, what are some things that you've noticed in your training that's different, that's going to be more beneficial for you? And maybe it depends on what type of track event you're doing, but if you go general or specific, like what's your just kind of thought of going road to track?
Well, like I said earlier, my default training method is to just ride like as much as I can. And if I feel good, I ride hard. And like, I love like the volume. And so that was one of the biggest changes that I've had like in the spring here, especially really so far, I just do a lot more like short intervals. Like when I was training with Bobby for the road, it was 3 to 6 hours every day. And that's just kind of like, that was expected, and that felt good, and I enjoyed it. And there were still intervals like mixed in there, but they were mostly sweet spot threshold, that type of work. And
were those slid just throughout, like, hey, today you're going to do them at hour 4, and maybe if you started them right away, they're more intense, or was
less so. But
Okay.
now I'm working with Mike Norton,
Okay.
and he actually lives in South Africa, but he was actually introduced to me through the national team for the track, and he was doing performance reviews and everything for a bunch of the track guys, and kind of worked out a thing where he was gonna try to help a bunch of us. And so he's done that where he slides. If it's a really intense workout, it's like you go out, you spin for 5 or 10 minutes, do like a little 10-minute warm up, and then you jump straight into like super high intensity intervals. And so actually that was one of the little hiccups, I guess, at the beginning when I first started training with them, because I was less, I don't know, structured, less used to the structure, I guess. So I would go and ride like 2 hours and then start the intervals, and then I couldn't do them. And I was like, and he's like, just stick to the plan. Like, there's a whole schedule laid out for you in the training plan. Like, just try to follow it as closely as you can, and it's gonna, like, things are gonna come together for you. And of course, he's right, and it worked. Sure. And so now sometimes I'll do, like, sometimes he wants me to do intervals under fatigue, and so we'll do an hour and a half like endurance, and then a bunch of like sweet spot with jumps in it, and then we'll do like some VO2 work like at hour 4. So it's all, again, the physiological side of that, I'm not, like, that's why I hire Mike, because I'm not super familiar with how it all works. But one of the big things is like being able to put out high power under load, partially because in team pursuit, especially the qualifying rounds, you're only, like, that gets you so far, but you have to do sometimes 3-4 full gas efforts at a World Cup to try to like make a final or make
and
the
that's
final
all in
rounds.
one day.
So
We're talking.
Sometimes it's usually prelims one day, but you'll do sometimes 2 of them.
Yeah.
And you can't really save it, because I mean, we've experienced before with the team, like, you get cut out of the first round, and then what do you do?
I was going to say, because that's interesting. Like, the clock changes things. You don't see the other guys. It's not like, hey, I'm going to get these points because I see the guy back there. I don't have to go.
Right.
You know, I don't have to go full gas. But when you don't see the other people around you, you have no.
Yeah.
There's no Ghost Rider on the Garmin.
Right. Exactly. So you're just going full gas all the time, and like, of course, you have that little extra bit of adrenaline and like a final round or something. But yeah, it's you definitely have to be able to ride like full gas, hard VO2 efforts under load, and with like already loaded in your legs. So
do you plan to lift more in the gym because of these types of efforts, or
I've been lifting quite a bit. Yeah. A lot of the track guys and all the track camps that I've been to, like, lifting is a big part of it. And especially, I mean, Ashton's like the king of lifting.
Really?
he always talks about getting prison big, but he lifts probably more than he rides.
Wow.
Like, even at those training camps where we would all go in for like 1 hour, maybe 2 or 3 days a week, and he would go in for 2 hours, like 2 or 3 days a week, and he's just lifting. And the day that we set the track record at the Colorado Springs Velodrome, like, he lifted 2 hours that morning.
Wow.
And it's like, so you'll even lift, like, he'll lift the morning of an event, and it's still like,
that's interesting.
I don't know.
Yeah, there's something to that, because I've had a good day riding, surprisingly, when I've lifted in the morning, just training. I don't think I would do it on an event. I'm sure he has way more experience with it than me. But if I had done it the day before, I'm like, I feel that soreness. So it's like the same day it seems to work. The day before you wake up, I'm like, damn, I'm sore as hell.
Yeah.
So that's really interesting. I'm gonna have to try and like Google him and see if he's ever talked deeply about that. Are you just doing, is it like deadlift, squat, like big compound moves, and then like
there's a lot of that stuff? A lot of deadlifting and squat, but there's also upper body work because of the standing start and the track. Like, I mean, you can lose seconds off the line if you can't get off. Like, you're pushing Ashton will ride like a 59 tooth front ring with a 14 in the back. I don't know. He rides a huge, massive gear. And so to explode off the line from a dead stop, like, you have to have upper body mass as well. And power to weight is like virtually non-existent. It's just straight power. So, dude,
I'm gonna have to send you this article that a guy working with us, Craig Polson, one of our other coaches, he sent me. It's this. Have you ever heard of the force number?
No.
I can't remember of the coach who came up with this, and it's not cycling related. It's more for NFL players, and I think maybe hockey. And within someone's 11 first strides, he can predict their like 40-yard running time, and then
Really?
talk to them about with a not the deadlift, but the one where you're in the trap like deadlift,
Yeah.
what they call it.
Yep.
There's
Yep.
a force
Yeah.
number, and it's however much you can do divided by, I think it's your pounds, not kilograms. He can show like how like good of an NFL player these people can be, and he's
Really?
like dead on. The article's really I'm gonna send this to you.
Yeah, send that to me.
But I can see that being interesting because we're like, how do we apply this to cycling now? Because it's funny that you bring up like watts per kg, even in things where you're talking to people about like an American road race. It's important. But I sometimes think we hear all these, European stories, and everyone thinks that like, I'm like, guys, you're not climbing an hour and a half. Like that's what matters. Like raw watts are really important in America. Like don't be fat, but
especially like domestic road racing. It's all about like 3 to 5 minute power. Like every race you go to Sunset at Redlands, Sunset Loop it might be like, I don't know, 7 or 8 minutes, but still it's like, that's the climbing you're talking about. And then, there's other race, like Joe Martin, the time trial is like, it's basically 8 minutes uphill. Like it's a sub 10 minute, like all out power test basically. And it's kind of crazy actually that a lot of times big power riders end up winning those stages over like a climber type, because power to weight really, it does matter obviously, but it's not going to win you many bike races in America unless it's the Tour of Utah. So I think people focus on that too much, especially with like how Zwift, I think like kind of, I've heard people talking about how weight affects you on Zwift, and in the real world, it seems like less of a factor to me.
Man, if I was, so these guys, they weigh in, and because I've got, our squad, they've got 5 in the US, 5 in Europe, they all race together and they have to do official weigh-ins. Like, so I'm about 183 plus or minus. Like if I have carved a lot, or if I'm just drinking a lot of water, like fighting thirst, I'm like, damn, I'm 3 pounds heavier today. Like, but I'm not, you know what I mean? It's like,
exactly.
You can't gain that, it's not food. So I think I would go nuts if I had to do these weigh-ins at part of the race. It would like really screw with me. So would you say then if someone's thinking about track, it's really, high intensity training and obviously racing, get ready to hit the gym. And I think that's really good to hear about the US racing scene. One thing that there's a lot of just like obsession with sweet spot where there's a place for that, but like it's not all you can do if you really want to race a bike. Like, you gotta go hard.
It makes you an effective teammate. You can ride the front, you can go on a break, but you're not really gonna win many bike races if all you're doing is sweet spot. Like,
dude, this is my preview clip right there. So this is really okay. So going down the track road, you kind of had an interesting, like, I got to choose left or I got to choose right. When things in the US, you were thinking about going to Belgium, you kind of were thinking about going to the track thing. Talk about how you decided, and if I'm missing details, it seemed like you had the opportunity of, I'm going to Belgium, I can ride with a team for the second half of, I think, 2019? Last year? And then, or it was go to Colorado Springs and focus on that. How did you like, that's such a tough decision.
I didn't take it lightly. Because up to that point, so basically I got invited to this track camp. I had reached out to the track program, like, honestly, I don't even remember when, and they said, like, no, thanks, but no thanks. And so I just kind of, like, forgot about it. And I got a track bike, and I think I had ridden the Boulder track maybe once or twice. And I did, like, the tester courses and got certified to even ride the track, and that was about it. And then following Joe Martin, I went to this first like little training camp at the Olympic Training Center, and like, I don't know, I was on really good form, obviously, because I had just come off the green
super
jersey.
Confident after a killer race.
So I showed up and I actually rode like really well and put out good numbers, and kind of started to dip my toe into the technique side of it, and it all just kind of started to come. And at the time, Clay, the national team coach, was like, we're still unsure if we're going to qualify for the Olympics. Like, we don't know. But at this point, like, things aren't looking good. but we kind of do, if we are going to make it, like, we need reinforcements, basically. We need some people to come in and make us better, essentially. And so he was like, I can't tell you one way or the other. I can't make any promises to you, but if you want to try, like, you could be one of those pieces of the puzzle that helps us like go to the Olympics. And that just sent off like fireworks in my head, and kind of hung a carrot in front of my face. And at that same time, I had been reached out to from the 303 project team to go race with them in Europe. And actually Belgium was a previous plan before 303 reached out.
Okay.
And then they reached out and they were like, we're going to go race in Portugal and Spain and do a bunch of stage races. And like, after Joe Martin again, like they were into having me come along. And so it was a big crossroads. And I reached out to a bunch of people that I wanted to kind of confide in and figure out, like, what should I do? Like, Europe has been my dream on the road forever. Mm-hmm. But even prior to that, like the Olympics, since I was a child, like who can say no to that? And it's, again, the Olympics was obviously not guaranteed, but the stage race is also like, that's a heavy scene. Like I am a bigger guy, and that's when power to weight does come into play, is at those big European stage races. And I was just trying to figure out, like, what's gonna put me where I want to go. Like, would I want to go to Europe and sign a contract? Sure. Would I want to go to the Olympics? Like, probably more so than the contract. So I ended up, I called a bunch of people, talked to a bunch of people, and ended up just driving my truck out to Colorado Springs. And I had a friend that was living there that he was gone, like on a work trip or something, for like a month and a half. So I just went and lived in his house and trained at the Olympic Training Center. And it was pretty cool. And when those camps did come around, and like in the big hitters, Ashton and Colby and Gavin and all those guys did start coming out, like I was right there with them, basically. I don't want to say like I was any better than them, but I had caught up a bit. So,
yeah, that's awesome. Yeah. That's cool, man. That's super exciting. Kind of, and you've had experiences where even if, you're talking about getting a contract in Europe in cycling, that's like a fickle thing. Like, it can be there.
It is very fickle. Yeah.
You know what I mean? So I think going after the Olympics and hearing the story that way, I definitely would have gone the way you went. And, you never know the connections that you're going to make in that new, like, you're known in the road. Now you get known on the track. And,
exactly.
It seems like you were having a cool go at gravel with some guys, the Rodeo Lab. And what's your thought on gravel in this whole mix now? It's like, really get your – don't tell me you're going to start racing cross, but what gravel –
That's not in the plan yet.
Gravel seems perfect for you. Out in Colorado, you love long rides. You love roaming around. You've got this, some of this – I looked at that one picture a year ago that you posted. It was like – I forget where you were in Colorado. It was just like the way the light hit. I'm sure there's maybe a little filter touch, but I was like, damn, that is amazing. Like, that should be on their website. What do you think, did you miss gravel and things being canceled? And are you just so focused on track right now?
I've been able to incorporate gravel basically in the sake of for the sake of working out again, like just training load. Mm-hmm. So even in my current like workout plan, like obviously there's different phases and stuff, but there's days where I get prescribed like 6-hour rides where I just go smash myself all day and that's it. And so I basically just incorporate those into gravel races. And so instead of like just going out and riding with my friends and or just like doing a training ride, I just make those races training rides. So it's been really fun. Actually, I did Mid-South, which was just insane. And it was kind of a rude awakening. And
that's not gravel, man. To me, that's not gravel. That's like hell.
Yeah. So I have like done a few, I guess 2 or 3 like little small races in Kansas, like here in the past month or 2.
Cool.
And I've been trying, it's always hit or miss, like the risk versus reward of doing that with COVID and everything, but they seem to have been like pretty safe and following guidelines. And as far as I know, no one's like gotten sick from all that. So that's
that's good,
reassuring.
man.
But yeah, it's a very fun scene. And I think that's the big thing for me moving forward is kind of track is where the business is, and road and gravel are for fun. And I think that doesn't take away from me like trying to achieve results at all. And I think if anything, it makes it more prevalent that I'll achieve more success, because that's kind of what happened last year. Is even though road was the focus, at least for the first half of the year, like I wasn't a professional anymore technically.
Mm-hmm.
Like I had lost my contract, kind of took a hit to the ego, and I was just racing with my friends and trying to like rediscover a love for the sport. And I think that's what road and gravel are going to stay as, is just fun avenues to stay motivated and have fun. And it's all working towards a common goal.
I mean, it's interesting because, you know, when you're a Cat 4 and you're trying to upgrade and you are thinking, you go in and race, like, I got to get this place because I'm going to get these upgrade points and da-da-da. When you do all that in your head, you don't win. When you're like, man, I'm racing Cat 3s, these guys are really fast, and you just go and race, you're like, holy crap, I just won. You had no race. And I think we forget that when you get better, and I'm sure, like, you know, you had written on this one blog that I was reading, it was like, when I no longer had expectations, I didn't have this thing of me being as like a pro, I started racing the best I've ever raced before.
Yeah.
You know, probably like there's got to be some mental thing to that, a little bit of weight lifted. And it's a funny thing when you're an American pro, like you go to a race that have amateurs, if you don't win, it's like you're not racing to win, you're racing so that you don't lose. You don't hear all
exactly.
Like, oh man, you guys came here, they didn't win. Like, you know, it's just like, oh my God, dude, I can only imagine what that has. It's got to be annoying, but
yeah.
So since that's coming up, what are some things that a lot of people that are trying to figure out, you know, I'll talk to some people that are, how old are you? 26?
26. Yep.
Yeah. So, you know, people in their 20s that the road scene's in an interesting place. I love what Colin Strickland has done in kind of redefining what pro means. And he's you know, doing a great thing for his personal life and embracing how he wants to race. I think a lot of people are seeing that. What do you think that you learn the most in going from collegiate success to a domestic elite team? I think Hincapie was pro Conti when you were racing with them. Not in the sense of like racing but maybe like the soft skills of like, now you're on a team, now you're getting paid, now you've got a pro license. Like, I'm sure there's all this other little baggage that you had no idea came with it.
Right.
Like, what are some pearls that somebody that is heading that way, you'd be like, man, just not negative things, but it's like, hey, this is a business now. This isn't just you playing with your friends.
Right. And I think the biggest thing I learned was just try to get rid of the idea of the concept of making it. Like, making it is not, it's not like you just arrive at this like magical point and then everything's easy. It's like, it just gets harder. Like, there's no, you sign a pro contract. Now go train harder, because it's gonna, like, you're gonna get your ass kicked. Like, and I think that idea of like not focusing on that, like achieving a certain like status, but rather just be the best you can be. And no matter what, that you're going to be better for it. And I remember seeing, I think it was one of the rally riders before I was on Hincapie, and he was like, he posted some video where he was like, you know, it's not all like fun and games. We don't just ride to coffee shops and eat pastries and then just go ride with our friends. Like, that's not pro bike racing. Like, it's harder than that. You go out when you don't want to ride. You go out when the weather's shit. You go out when like everything seems to be going wrong, and you still got work to do. Like, when even in your personal life, when everything's like going haywire, like the bike doesn't care.
Like, you ready.
So
it's interesting. It's almost like now you're presented the opportunity to really take advantage of better training, better coaching. You're riding with better athletes. Like, now the work really begins.
Yeah, exactly.
It seems like on a micro scale, it's almost like when you have your 5-hour endurance ride, it's like when you start getting tired at hour 3, you've worked that hard to now do the work. Like,
right, exactly.
It's interesting. I was actually interviewing for a job one time, and this guy, I'll never forget this. He said, "So what's your five-year plan?" And I was like, "Is he asking me like, do I want to eventually become a manager?" Like I was in sales and da da da. So I
Yeah.
see this, and he's like, "You want to know what the answer is?" And I was like, "Oh, you have an answer for this?" He's like, "Well." He's like, right now, this is the position you're interviewing for. You should be telling me that you're going to be the best, the number one at it, the best in the country. You're going to work your ass off. And then because of how good you are at this, then you figure out what happens in 5 years. And I was like, damn, dude, you set me up for like a serious like failure. Like I'm like looking way past the 8 ball. But it stuck with me. It's like, this is today. What am I doing today to get better? Like
that applies totally.
Yeah.
You shouldn't have the idea of like, I just want to be a pro. Like that, if that's your end goal, then you already lost. Like you need to be the best bike racer you can be. And if that's good enough to be pro, if that's good enough to go to the Olympics, then so be it. But every day, just be the best you can be, get better, and like focus on the big picture. Like it's not all what happens on the bike. Half of, or more than half of like what happens is what happens off the bike too. Nutrition, sleep, like mental well-being, all of it. It all plays a factor. And that it's a big picture sport. Like you have to be well-rounded as a human being to be a well-rounded athlete at a professional level.
It's like it's lifestyle.
Yeah.
Not just, there's no 9 to 5. And when you're talking about well-rounded being, what do you think also, like, they actually asked us on a Velo News podcast, they're talking about being an all-around cyclist or being like a sprinter, a climber. Which do you think is more advantageous, or which would you prefer to be?
It's hard to say. I think some people have a certain skill set or certain fitness, like, I don't know, trademark, I guess, where they've always kind of pigeonholed themselves as a sprinter or as a climber. And I've seen people be successful at that, and I've seen people get destroyed because of that. Like a lot of climbers you'll see, they can't even ride in a pack. Like they literally, I read an article about some American that went to the world tour, and he was a pure climber. And he was like, yeah, I can climb pretty well if I can make it to the bottom of the climb with the group. And it's like, he was getting dropped on the flats leading in.
You know who that might have been actually? He was actually just on a pocket. Cameron Cogburn was infamous for
really
notorious climber. And I'm not dissing the dude. He would even say like, I was getting shelled in the back of this NRC race. I think it was in Pennsylvania. And
Reading.
I'm like, what the hell is Cameron doing back here? He's like, dude, I don't ride in the groups like that. I was like, oh, it's not just me that's scared to death. All these like, it's funny when you're Cat 1, man, pros can be intimidating. And that's actually one thing that I'll ask you about you ride really, really well in a group. And we even had talked before of like having the mentality of, hey, even though you're a pro team and you've got 7 guys here, I'm this, amateur dude, Cat 1, like I've got a job to do also. Where does your confidence come in that? Is it just from experience, or is it just like, yo, dude, I'm here too. We're all in the same bike race. I don't care. And did that attitude change when you were now the pro?
It did change a bit, because when I was riding with Arapaho and I was on a domestic elite team, we were like scratching the door of the continental level, and I think we were better than some continental teams. But at the same time, like you don't have that pro license, so like nobody can. Like it was similar. And when you're on Hincapie and you do like, you just show up in your neon and you ride wherever you want because people let you. And I think that's a mentality that also gets shook when they go to Europe. Like when the team would go to Europe, like you have to earn your stripes. Like you're not just going to get the spot because you have a pro license. Like everyone's got one over there.
Right.
So it's like, but at the same point, like on DNA, I remember riding like next to Elevate, and they were like, dude, get out of here. And I'm like, no, I don't care that you have a pro license and I don't. That means nothing to me anymore. Like this was obviously following the Hincapie year, and it's like, just because I don't have UCI America Tour on my jersey anymore, what does that mean? Like who cares? Just own it. Be there.
It was a really interesting experience when we did Tour of Southland, being a composite team. We really had a hard time getting on the same page. We were a very different style of riders. The crosswinds really It was something that I've never raced in before. Like, it was eye-opening. But one thing that was hard, so as we're kind of getting shelled physically and also by the weather, and it was just like chaos at times, there was a day I'm like, yo, I got to move up. Like, we were talking like there's going to be this turn, there's going to be this headwind. So I move up, and this dude's like, what are you doing up here? I'm like, dude, I'm moving up. Like, and he goes to me, we're composition riding. And I look, and it's like 3 teams all together, and I'm like this loose fish just like through. He was like pissed, and I was like, yo, dude, I'm not going to go to the back. But I was super intimidated. I'm just like, I'm like, where are my teammates at? And I could see like Patrick, he's trying to move up over there. And we got like this guy over there. I'm just like, damn, like we are just not together. And
that's one of the tricks is strength in numbers.
That's one of the tricks that you always talked about. What do you think,
if you're together, if you're with all your homies, like it's a lot easier to ride wherever you want. And people aren't going to be like, what are you doing here? Because you got a whole squad around you.
Yeah.
And so I think that's one of the big things is if a team is strong enough and together enough to ride where they want, when they want, and all together, like that demands respect. And you can't like shake someone that you can't shake a whole, like if a whole team is sitting there, you're not going to be like, guys, get out of here. No, it's like
we're here, dude.
Like, exactly. Do something about it.
Did somebody naturally tend to be like, yo guys, we're going over here, and be kind of like the first, getting in, and like, if it's a GC race, obviously like your main guy is going to be a little bit more protected. Did people just naturally fall into those roles of like how you rolled together as an amoeba, or did it like kind of, I guess, do you gel out? When you've raced with someone for a few years, you can tell, like, you get brought back, you're like, and I bet so-and-so is going right now, and boom.
Exactly.
Just feel that. Like, I'm assuming when you're riding in that composition style, you just know where your guys are going to be at.
Yeah. Right. Especially the more you ride with the team, the more you ride with your teammates. That's what training camps are for. You get on the same page. You do a few, like, early season races to see how everyone rides. Even at a local level, like, you can still see, like, is this guy just going to sit in all day, or is he going to attack like nonstop, or is he going to like be really smart and strategic? And you kind of learn which teammates do what. And then it's like, once you figure all that out, at the same time, there's usually on the pro teams, there's usually a road captain that's appointed by a director. Or if there's not one appointed by a director, somebody assumes that role. And so that's like when you were talking about us on DNA last year, like we didn't have a director. So it's like, someone just got to step up. And at that point, I felt like I, in a sense, was the most qualified. And I also knew that I was like riding pretty well. So it was just kind of, that just kind of happened organically, I guess.
It was natural. It was like, and we were all about that. I think we were all happy that somebody was like wanting to take those reins instead of having to be bad news bears totally. Where do you think that leadership comes from in Grand Koontz? Like, have you always been that way? Just find your confidence, or?
It depends on, I think in cycling, it comes more naturally because that's where I feel really over anything else. That's where I feel the most qualified to be a leader. Like that's where I feel at home, is on the bike, in a peloton, like whatever. And so I always kind of struggled actually growing up with, like, I was always good at sports, but I was never great at sports. Like I was always good at school, but I was never great at school. And cycling's like the first thing that I've had that like inkling of an idea that I could be great at this. And so I think
you are great at it, man. You should have that mindset. Like anybody towing the line and thinking of being on an Olympic team is a great freaking athlete. Like, I hope you pat yourself on the back a little bit for that. I know you have higher ambitions, but dude, come on, man. It's so cool.
Yeah. So I think that like feeling qualified and feeling, I don't know, most at home in my own skin, like on the bike. Like I think that lends itself to me wanting to be a leader and like adopting that position organically.
Yeah. And I think you have a good leadership style in that you're not telling people, you're leading them. And that, even if you weren't the best racer, I think you have a good way of approaching and laying out things. Just like a leader sometimes just opens the conversation and it's like, hey guys, let's get on the same page. I think this is what could happen. And it wasn't like, all right, I'm get in this jersey. You're riding for me, and it was just like, let's be a team,
Yeah.
I think it was really good. How does that play out then? And we're talking about getting the pro license, and like some people think like, I've made it now. But then really it's like, okay, I'm in AAA baseball. I'm trying to go to the pros.
Yeah.
Does the dynamic of a team change when you're on Arapahoe? It was probably everybody all for one and one for all. Let's win. Let's go try and be a domestic pro team. Like, let's win the race. When you get to the pro level and now everybody's trying to make the next step up, does that kind of screw up sometimes the team dynamic of all for one? Like,
it definitely does. Yeah. People, the higher you get, and I've even experienced it at the lower levels where I've had teammates like straight up say, like, if you're working for a teammate, you're wasting your time. Like, if you want to make it, you just go out there and take it. Like, and I've had like same thing on Hincapie, basically. Like, in my mind, my job, my mindset the whole time was like, if my teammates are winning, like, I'm winning.
Yeah.
But at the same time, I might regret saying this, but my management didn't seem to have that same idea.
Yeah.
They wanted everyone to go out there and just kind of like quick step races. Like, they don't always race all for one leader. Like, they go to the classics with 6 guys who can win. Right. And they just like, that's kind of that was the leadership style, I guess, that Hincapie like tried to adopt. It was like, we're all here to win. Like, right. Go shake some stuff up and see what happens. And so that kind of didn't lend itself to my, I don't want to say I was like a servant, but a bit like, especially when I show up and I'm racing with all these guys that I've looked up to and I have raced against, and like, they've beaten me a million times. And like, I really respect them as riders and as humans, and I want to help them achieve their successes. And we did. But at the same time, I felt like that isn't always, the trickle down isn't always there for, not that you're always doing it for recognition, but at the same time, you gotta, I don't have a contract anymore. So here we are.
Gotta get recognized. Yeah.
Yeah.
It's interesting too. Purvis was talking about how he was having a conversation before the crit that he did well in at OKC, where he made a comment to Colin Strickland about a rider that had really good results. And he's like, that guy's not a bike racer. Nobody knows. He gets good results, but like, he doesn't race. He doesn't put on a show. He's not out there. He's not known with it. And it's just interesting how this game works.
It is. It is.
So if you had a choice, are you in the break all day or are you waiting 5K to go? Are you more strategic, or are you like, I'm getting?
If you would have asked me 2 years ago, I would have said break all day. But I'm realizing more and more, especially at the big races, that a late attack works way more often than an early attack. So I actually prefer to go to, like, I think 2 of my biggest results last year, I won a stage at the Vuelta a Guatemala, and then that stage at the Joe Martin stage race that I was second, and I attacked with 20K to go, maybe in both of those, 25K. Okay. And then the late attacks where the field's like kind of looking at each other, trying to figure out who's going to take charge, and just got to capitalize. That's when people are actually tired. That's when, if you have been saving all day, like,
dude, it was so awesome to watch, man. It was just like, I don't know if we had just pulled somebody back or kind of on a roller, and I'm like, I think that was Grant that just took off. And like, you went out and did you bridge with some guy or were you with some guy?
Yeah.
I can't remember. Yeah. Both. And I think Tanner looked at me. I'm like, dude, Grant's up the road. And he's like, oh shit. Or somebody asked that. And I was like, I hope we don't see him again until the end.
Yeah. And I think that was one of the things is like, it was kind of a windy section through the trees.
100%.
I attacked right over the top of this climb. And apparently most of the field didn't even know that we were gone.
No, I don't think people had any idea, because we had just come down, like, not a descent, but like a small hill. Just like you're saying, it was windy. It was, I don't know. It was one of those times. It was a perfect time. You were just gone before I think everyone was like, wait, what's going on? And so that was awesome. So a couple of last questions for you, and I'll let you get back to doing the waffles and everything. When you were talking about that guy's book and the 4-year game plan, we kind of got off on a tangent, but I wanted to go back to this. Did that work for him when he was going to these races super gassed, or did you say he wrote himself out of that? I want to get clarification on that. Did that work for him?
He basically sabotaged himself and lost a lot of races.
To do better.
Yeah. He was adding to his training load. going into a race already fatigued, and then he was a match sprinter, so it was a little different game, but he would go into a race fatigued and then do 10 rounds of match sprinting, and he's already tired coming into it, and then he's just digging himself a hole, and then he comes out of that better, and then just repeat that cycle over and over again. It's that functional overload type mentality. Yeah. And I'm sure he had coaches and training metrics to try to navigate that, but
yeah. I'd love to catch up like when you're a year down the road. And, you know, I think an interesting conversation I've been having with Patrick and just looking at other athletes and like the whole idea of peaking. Some people are saying like, does peaking really work? And, you know, how exactly does this happen? And, you know, does it add added stress to an athlete? And like, why is it then when you're not peaking, sometimes you go to a race and have a phenomenal performance and it's like really a B race that you're training through. And, I'd just be curious down the road how everything unwinds for you as you're looking so far down the road. And kind of, it sounds like, hey, we've got this plan, we're building, you're racing, you know, gravel races just as training races. And it'd just be really interesting to see what your coach Mike like pulls out from that. And yeah. I
don't know either. So
yeah, no, we'll have to probably like circle back in a year and like T-minus 2 years till track. So when will you find how does that work when you're like working to get on an Olympic team? Is this the team's decided like a year before, 2 years before?
It's pretty last minute.
So wow, okay. So
there's going to be,
you got 4 years basically, or 3.5 years, let's say.
Yeah.
Cool.
So there's basically, the way it's worked in the past at least, is there's these training camps yearly, and there's like this core group of guys that I wasn't in the previous quad that keeps coming back, and they're working towards the Olympic dream. They're going to World Cups, they're going to Pan Ams, they're going to all these races with the national team to earn points to qualify for the Olympics. And then there's a whole point system. It's really bizarre. I think it's being revised actually to qualify to go. But there's basically once the team realized that they were kind of missing the mark, like Clay started bringing in some outsiders, and I was one of those outsiders that got brought in. So, I mean, I could work for the next 3.5 or 3 years, and then some outsider comes in and takes my spot. And that's just that's part of the game, but it's also motivating because you're never secure.
Are there independent people also that aren't on the like Olympic funded team that can get a spot? Because when I was, the only reason I know anything about this Olympic thing was I got a call, was it 2 years ago? And I did a tandem for the Paralympic rider. Yeah. But he was not on the USA team. He was a self-funded, he didn't make the team, but he could still do World Cup events. And so there was he's like, so FYI, we are not Team USA. We're R5, He kind of laid the land out. And then when we got to the event, he's like, so sometimes it can be weird. Like, we're American, but we're not at the Team USA 10. And so I was like, cool, like, let's go. Like, how do we get you on that team? And it was the only reason I was there was his original pilot, I believe it was called, the person in the front. He was visually impaired, was a dual citizen, I believe, and you had to be only American citizen or whatever. So I was like, how do we get you on this? Whoever is your next person, like, dude, you should keep shooting for that. And he was trying to explain the point system and like where he would have to race and how he would qualify. And I was like, is this confusing? He's like, oh, it's extremely confusing. He's like, I've been in this for years and it's very hard to explain. Yeah. So
there's caveats everywhere. It's political. There's logistics.
Politics, dude. The stories I was hearing I couldn't believe it. And they had one event where somebody mismeasured a time trial and there was a huge upset. Like somebody beat somebody and then somebody measured it and found out and they were going to re-race the race. And I was like, dude, this is insane.
So one of the things behind the scenes is like, I've been trying to get a USA kit to race with the national team since juniors, U23s, elites. Like I knew like from the start of me cycling, like national team is, if I ever want to go to the Olympics, like that's where I have to get to. And so there was this whole thing with, I just got rejected time and time again. And that was one of the things that was so enticing about Clay giving me, he didn't just give it to me on a silver platter. He just left the door cracked and he was like, if you want it, like, come and get it. So I mean, that's always been a dream of mine. And I actually still haven't gotten a USA kit, but
Dude, don't stop, man. I
I'm
think
not done.
good, because if anybody, I appreciate your posts on Instagram. You put a lot of thought into things. You're a very sharing person, which is not the most common thing all the time, of
Hmm.
like letting people in on failure, success.
Hmm.
You're not just posting a highlight reel. It's like, hey,
Right.
this is me, and that was really a big reason why I know that so many people will get so much out of this, but especially just inspiring people to like just keep going and become the
Yeah.
best you.
Yeah.
The door is going to open, and that might just be
Uh-huh.
like a little crack, like you're saying. You got to keep going to get in there, but like,
Yeah.
doors open. And
Yeah.
it's so my last question for you will be, where do you think you've learned the most, in what scenario, or has there been something that you're just like, that you carry with you, that maybe continues to drive this determination, or continues to help you be the leader that you are to a group of people or to yourself? I mean, you're just going after life. And has there ever been any like thing that you think back on, like, man, I'm so glad that experience happened, because I learned so much from that?
It's the cliche of like, you learn the most through the failures. And
Yeah.
that year on Hincapie, when the team lost funding, they lost pro continental status, cut my contract in half. I broke my arm, like shattered my elbow, like right before all that happened. So I was left out on the market, like trying to find a contract with, I'd also struggled with some other health issues. And it was like all that combined, like I reached a point where I was ready to quit. And I was like, all right, like, and it just the thought of quitting felt like a relief, which is how I definitely knew something needed to change.
Mm-hmm.
And I kind of sat with that for a couple of weeks, and eventually I was like, no, I'm not done. Like, there's a whole, I think one of the things that I've also learned the most from is watching other people quit. Like, so many of my friends don't race anymore. So many of the people you come up with through the sport just fade away.
Mm-hmm.
And I think that's one of the things that really makes someone successful. And it's, again, the cliche of like, you don't have to be the best. It's not about how hard you like can hit. It's about how hard you can get hit and keep going. And
Yeah.
so it's like, at this point, there's not much money in the sport. It's kind of like floundering on the roadside. Opportunities are changing. The whole dynamics of racing is shifting. And a lot of people have lost interest. And in my mind, it's like, eventually, if I just keep at this, like I still see myself getting better every week, every training block,
Yeah,
every
dude, you're
year.
26,
And
man. You've got
it's
like,
like, why, how could I invest this much of my life and give it all up when the going gets tough? And
yeah.
so I try not to. It's not always easy. It's not always straightforward. It doesn't
Yeah.
always make sense, but it's what I've given my life to. And until I stop seeing myself get better, why not keep going?
You're going to be in it for a while then, man, because you're going to be getting better. I mean, I think back to I started when I was 26. I started riding a bike. And I remember a guy telling me that I respect, like, he's in upstate New York. He has ridden his whole life. He's like, you'll probably be your best at like early 30s. You'll have 7 years of riding in, da da da. But because of like new training techniques and things get better, and like you learn more, like I'm 38 now and I'm getting fast. Like I look back at 33 and I'm like, dude, I would smoke me at 33.
Exactly.
I was supposed to be my best. Like, hell no.
Yeah.
So like the trajectory, and especially things like training with power, it's still relatively a new science. Like just every year there's new ways to figure things out. And
Totally.
man, I hope, don't stop. I hope that you keep going as long as you're having fun with it. I mean, I think you have years and years, and you're going to have a lifetime of success of whatever you choose to do. But man, this was incredible. I really appreciate you taking the time to share your knowledge. People are going to take away a lot from this, and that was really the whole point. So Grant, I really appreciate it, man.
Awesome. I'm happy to help.
Yeah, dude, it's incredible. And keep us posted. I'm going to hit you back up, and we'll have to circle back in a year and see what you're doing. And I'll hopefully before that, hopefully COVID passes and get to ride out there in Colorado. And
absolutely.
I was actually thinking about you. I was in North Carolina this past weekend and riding some hills. And I think the last time I rode some serious hills. We didn't climb anything crazy, but there were like, I'm in Memphis. It's flat as hell.
Yeah. Yeah.
I mean, the Boulder trip was probably the last like mountain I think I was on. So
Yeah. Yeah.
yeah.
Sweet.
All right, man.
Come
Well,
back.
have a great night. Good luck with everything, and we'll catch up more on Instagram soon.
Perfect. Sounds
All right,
good.
man.
Appreciate talking.
Yeah. Thank you. See
All
ya.
right. See ya.